All right, guys, today we are going to be reacting to the reason why Asians are more successful than Westerners. Let's jump in.
Now, what about family structure, Tom? Again, I'm quoting you. Most black children were being raised in two-parent families in 1960. 30 years after the liberal welfare state, the great majority of black children were being raised by single parents.
Yes.
How does that, by the way, we should note that Patrick Moynihan publishes the Moynihan Report in 1965.
Yes.
And he's alarmed because the illegitimacy rate among black families is 25% then. Now, among whites, it's over a third.
Yes.
Hispanics, it's over half. And among African Americans, it's over 70%. What's going on there?
Wow, that's a
Well, this is again, this too.
that's very high. Wow, 70%. Wow, that's high. That means that you're literally you're reading, but you're not understanding what you're reading at that point.
You find the same thing in Britain. You find it in France and Norway. You find it in the Western world. In fact,
The dissolution of the family structure.
Oh yeah, there are any number of Western nations where 40% of the children are raised with only one parent.
Right.
At the extremes, compared to Asian countries, at the extremes, Iceland, it's 2 out of 3 children born are raised in a single-parent home. In South Korea, it's 1 out of 66.
Wow.
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 And so what?
Wow, that's insane.
That's the welfare state? What?
Yes.
It is.
Oh, you're paying. You're creating a situation where if the first of all, you're creating a situation where if the man stays there, the government will not give the woman welfare, and if he leaves, it will. And so they're paying. When you pay people not to get married, more people don't get married.
Right.
Simple as that.
Okay. So what would have happened if Lyndon Johnson, instead of becoming a liberal, had remained a crusty, tough, skeptical Texas conservative,
Yes.
which is certainly the way he started his career. If Lyndon Johnson had embraced the constrained vision, instead of instituting the war on poverty and the Great Society and so forth, what would the country look like today?
A lot better. You would not have the same rates for crime and so on. Because
Wow.
you see,
Only for that decision alone? Nah, man. Now, really?
you can't have
Let
a
me know in the
welfare
comment
state
section
in a
what you guys
democratic
think.
country unless you first have a welfare state vision. And when you buy all the assumptions of that vision, then you're buying a lot of trouble. One of the episodes I think epitomized it was in France in this case. That there were knife attacks by various people from North Africa against Chinese people in some suburb of Paris. And one of the things that the attackers said, that why are you attacking the Chinese? And it wasn't because of anything the Chinese had done to them. He said, they have nice clothes and big cars.
Wow.
That's not fair. I mean, that's, egalitarianism as a philosophy is one thing, but the actual consequences of it mean things like resenting other people's good fortune. Right.
And not only that, the thing is that when we see some of these results, it's like there's no consequences. Crime goes crazy. A lot of these people, they're in favor of, justice reform, but this justice reform means that criminals are free going everywhere with no consequences. So we practice a lot of these philosophies that come from the egalitarian school, but we see the bad result, but nobody's held accountable.
All right. So one response to the gap, again, I return to this gap between African Americans and other Americans, affirmative action.
Yes.
Which brings us back to your alma mater, Harvard. According to
I'll never live it down.
You'll never live it down, yes. You once told me that the principal benefit of a Harvard degree was never again having to be impressed by anybody who had a Harvard degree. Is that
Absolutely.
all right? So these are figures that were published in the Harvard Crimson, the student newspaper. In the Harvard class of 2019, these are the kids who will be graduating next June, the average SAT score for black students was 2149. By the way, these are all good scores, but for black students, 2149, white students, 2218, Asian students, 2300.
Okay.
Well, now that must be reasonable because it's taking place at Harvard, the seat of reason.
Well, that wasn't quite how I described it when I was there.
Affirmative action. Is that?
Oh, because of the affirmative action. That's why some of those numbers look higher. Okay.
We ought not to be doing this?
You know, there are various laws and policies that benefit one group at the expense of another. But I think affirmative action has the distinction of being one that it harms everybody, though in different ways. And so there's a lot of evidence that there are black kids who have all the qualifications to be successes in college, who nevertheless are failures because they are systematically mismatched with institutions whose standards they don't meet, even though they may meet the standards of 80 or 90% of the colleges in America. I remember first aware of this when I was teaching at Cornell, and I found that half the black students at Cornell were on some kind of academic probation. And so I went over to the administration building and looked up the SATs of these students. The average black student at Cornell at that time scored at the 75th percentile.
Which is pretty darn good.
Yes. And so that means that
70% percentile, meaning like, okay, right on the line, right?
Then that in most colleges in this country,
We'll
they
take
would
you.
have no trouble, and many of them would be on the dean's list. But at Cornell, the average liberal arts student at that time was in the 99th percentile.
Wow.
And when you're teaching a student,
Wow. But when you put it in perspective, you know, you're still 70 percentile, but compared with the other ones, they're almost in 100 percentile. Is you're going against the best of the best.
students like that, you teach at a pace
Yeah.
that most people
Can-
of any race cannot keep up with.
Cannot keep up with.
And it was always complained that I was assigning all kinds of reading, but heck, you know, I'm teaching kids who are in the top 1%. They can keep up with the reading that I'm assigning.
Wow.
So Cornell was taking
I mean,
1,300
Thomas Sowell,
black
wow.
kids and spending 4 years teaching them to feel inadequate.
Yes, and succeeding at that.
Wow, Thomas Sowell does not play. He's saying like, I'm just assigning a lot of reading. If you can't keep up, you can't keep up. That's what he's saying. Wow, that's insane. This is the side of Thomas Sowell I never seen. Right, but when he goes to practice, he goes full libertarian. Hey man, only the true ones are the ones that survive in this world, man, kind of a thing. That's crazy. Wow, this thing just put a lot of stuff into perspective, folks. He's basically saying like, it's true. Like if you have a lot, listen, getting a high score at 70% is not bad. It's pretty damn good. But you're comparing with almost some kids that almost have 100% percentile. Some of these folks that just retain that information, they just read it once and they retain it. Some of these folks like me, that we have to read a lot of things multiple times, and that's okay, folks. That's okay. Still, it's not an excuse. But you're competing against those folks. Wow. That's why Asians are killing it. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one.